As I step into the quiet room, I sense the tension of the ego that fills the space. Donald Trump sits across from me, an unmistakable presence, radiating both confidence and a subtle unease. I remind myself that beneath every persona, every public image, lies a private psyche, a constellation of archetypes, shadows, and unresolved conflicts. Mr. Trump, I begin. The mind is a landscape, not a performance. What you present to the world is only a part of what resides within. He nods, slightly skeptical, yet attentive. I see the archetypal energy of the king, dominant, commanding, protective, but also the trickster, ever alert, masking vulnerabilities with bravado. My task is not to confront him with judgment, but to guide him toward self-reflection, toward the hidden currents shaping his actions. I asked him to describe a recent decision or conflict that weighed heavily on him. He speaks of challenges, rivals, and the need to assert strength. As he talks, I notice patterns, a need for control, a struggle with acceptance, and a constant oscillation between admiration and fear of others. I reflect silently. The shadow is present. In Jungian terms, it is that part of the psyche which contains what we refuse to acknowledge, our weaknesses, fears, and impulses. For someone in the public eye, the shadow often hides behind a mask of certainty and assertiveness, yet it shapes behaviors more than the conscious mind realizes. Mr. Trump, I continue gently, to understand your actions, we must also understand the parts you do not see. Those impulses that guide your decisions when you believe no one is watching. The shadow is not an enemy. It is a guide. Ignoring it only strengthens its unconscious influence. He fidgets slightly, a brief crack in the armor of composure. This is the moment when the ego encounters the unconscious. He may resist, but resistance is itself an opening, a signal that something within him seeks recognition. I asked him to visualize a situation where he felt both pride and fear. As he describes it, layers emerge: fear of loss, desire for approval, and an intense drive to be perceived as powerful. The interplay of ego and archetypes, the struggle between the conscious image and the unconscious needs, becomes evident. This session is not about labels or diagnosis. It is about illumination. Every word, every hesitation, every gesture reveals the hidden architecture of a mind. Jungian therapy seeks to make the unconscious conscious, to integrate the shadow, and to align the ego with the deeper currents of psyche. Even in the presence of power and status, the human mind remains vulnerable, complex, and profoundly influenced by the forces it refuses to acknowledge. Today, our journey begins with observation, reflection, and the courage to confront the unseen aspects of the self. As the session progresses, I guide him gently toward the terrain of the shadow, the part of the psyche that harbors repressed desires, fears, and contradictions. He sits tall, exuding confidence, yet there is a subtle tension in his posture, an unspoken admission that there are parts of himself he has yet to recognize. Mr. Trump, I begin. We all carry within us forces we seldom acknowledge. These forces shape our decisions, our relationships, and even how we define success. To deny them is to give them power over you without your awareness. He shifts slightly, a flicker of curiosity or perhaps resistance. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is not a threat but a mirror. It reflects what the conscious mind avoids: anger, insecurity, vulnerability, and even hidden aspirations. For someone so public, the shadow often manifests indirectly, in impulsive statements, defensiveness, or the relentless drive for recognition. I invite him to describe a situation where he felt frustrated or humiliated. As he speaks, patterns emerge: fear of judgment, desire for control, and a compulsion to dominate conversations and outcomes. These are the echoes of the shadow, influencing behavior without conscious permission. The shadow, I explain, is not something to eliminate. It is something to integrate. When you face it, you gain not only self-awareness but freedom. The very impulses that have driven you can be transformed into conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. There is a pause, a moment of silence filled with introspection. I notice how the mind resists this confrontation, how the ego instinctively defends itself. Yet, even resistance is a revelation. It signals the areas where integration is most needed. I asked him to imagine a dialogue between his public persona and the parts of himself he avoids. The vulnerable, the uncertain, the insecure. The exercise is uncomfortable, yet illuminating. What emerges is a map of internal conflicts. The king archetype demanding control, the warrior seeking victory, and the child within longing for acceptance. These archetypes, though powerful, must not operate in isolation. The human psyche thrives on balance. The conscious ego must recognize and harmonize with the shadow, not suppress it. Only then does the mind achieve a form of wholeness that transcends mere ambition or public perception. As the session continues, I sense a subtle shift. The rigidity softens. The confidence becomes less performative and more introspective. He is beginning, however slightly, to meet the unseen forces within himself. This is the essence of Jungian therapy: to illuminate what has remained hidden, to confront fear with awareness, and to allow the mind to integrate its own contradictions. The journey has only just begun. The mind is a vast landscape, and today we have merely crossed the threshold into the terrain of the unconscious. As the session unfolds, the conversation naturally drifts toward power and success, domains where persona is most comfortable and visible. Yet beneath the bravado, I sense the pulse of vulnerability. In Jungian terms, this tension between the conscious ego and the unconscious drives is central to understanding the psyche. Mr. Trump, I begin, your achievements are undeniable, yet I am interested in the forces that propel you beyond them. Power and success are more than external accomplishments. They are reflections of internal needs, fears, and archetypes. He leans back, a mixture of curiosity and caution in his eyes. I observe the archetypes at play. The king, commanding and decisive, seeking to assert authority over the environment. The warrior, relentless in pursuing objectives. And the magician, striving to transform reality through skill and vision. These archetypes are strong, yet they exist alongside the child archetype, a part of the psyche that carries vulnerability, uncertainty, and unmet emotional needs. I asked him to reflect on a moment of perceived failure. The reaction is immediate, a defensive posture, a recollection of perceived injustices. This is the mind shielding itself, yet the shadow whispers in subtle ways: anxiety, self-doubt, and the longing for validation. Jung believed that confrontation with such inner conflicts is essential for integration. The ego must not dominate the psyche. It must harmonize with it. Power, I continue, without self-awareness can become a mask. It may protect you from vulnerability, yet also isolates you from your own depth. The mind seeks control, yet control alone does not bring wholeness. He pauses, the first sign of genuine introspection. I note how often the pursuit of external success is intertwined with the unconscious desire for recognition and acceptance. Here lies a paradox. The stronger the public persona, the greater the potential for hidden inner tension. The king archetype, while commanding and visible, cannot soothe the child within. We explore this dynamic further, discussing how the mind experiences tension between ambition and fear, dominance and intimacy. Jungian psychology emphasizes that such inner contradictions are natural. The key is integration rather than suppression. By acknowledging vulnerability, the ego gains flexibility, depth, and resilience. I guide him to visualize a dialogue between his powerful public self and the inner child. This exercise reveals the interplay of confidence and fear, of projection and self-awareness. Even in a figure of authority, the human mind contains hidden layers that shape behavior, decisions, and emotional life. As the session nears its close, I sense a subtle shift. The rigidity of the persona softens slightly. For a brief moment, the ego is no longer a fortress, but a participant in dialogue with the unconscious. This is the beginning of insight, the recognition that true strength includes awareness of vulnerability, and that wholeness is found not in domination alone, but in integration of all aspects of the self. As the session deepens, I guide him toward more subtle and often uncomfortable territory, the realm of unconscious fears and projections. Every human being carries aspects of themselves that they cannot fully see, and these aspects often surface in interactions with others. In Jungian psychology, these are called projections, the tendency to see in others what we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves. Mr. Trump, I say, the people you admire, oppose, or criticize intensely may reflect parts of yourself. Recognizing this is not weakness. It is insight. The unconscious often speaks through our perceptions of others. He shifts slightly, the familiar bravado tempered by curiosity. I notice patterns. Rivals are not just competitors. They mirror insecurities, ambitions, and unacknowledged traits. Allies may reflect the ego's desire for validation. Through projections, the mind externalizes inner conflict, creating a world that feels both threatening and affirming. I asked him to consider a recent conflict, someone he intensely disliked or distrusted. As he recounts the story, subtle contradictions emerge. Fear of losing control, longing for respect, and an underlying uncertainty about his own decisions. Here's a shadow at work, the hidden, disowned part of the psyche that fuels both anxiety and aggression. Understanding these projections, I continue, allows you to reclaim the parts of yourself you may have abandoned or denied. Every criticism you direct outward is an opportunity to look inward, to integrate and transform. We explore his relationships with colleagues, family, and the public. I observe how patterns of distrust, defensiveness, and assertiveness reflect unresolved internal dynamics. The mind creates narratives, often exaggerating threats or diminishing support, in order to maintain a fragile sense of control. The challenge is not to eliminate these perceptions, but to bring awareness to them, to recognize the dialogue between the conscious and unconscious mind. I then invite him to imagine himself observing his behavior from the perspective of his inner self, the part that experiences fear, doubt, and longing. He hesitates, a subtle sign of internal tension. This hesitation is meaningful. It reveals the presence of an inner observer, the seed of self-awareness that can guide transformation. Jung believed that confronting projections and shadows is essential for authentic growth. The more we acknowledge the unconscious forces at play, the less they control us. Power, influence, and authority gain depth only when tempered by self-reflection. The mind that integrates its shadow moves from reaction to conscious action, from fear-driven impulses to deliberate choices. By the end of this segment, a subtle shift occurs. There is a flicker of insight, the recognition that the intensity he experiences in relationships, admiration, anger, or fear, is also a reflection of what lies within. In Jungian terms, this is the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming a whole, self-aware individual, even amidst the complexities of life and leadership. As we reach the final stage of our session, I reflect on the journey we have taken together through the landscape of the psyche. Donald Trump, a man known worldwide for his confidence and authority, has revealed glimpses of his inner world, archetypes in tension, shadows unacknowledged, projections influencing perception, and vulnerabilities lurking beneath the surface. Mr. Trump, I say, the mind is not fully understood through success, power, or public acclaim. True understanding comes from dialogue with yourself, with the parts you seldom see. We discuss integration, the process of recognizing and embracing all aspects of the self, from the commanding king to the sensitive inner child, from the shadow to the trickster. Jungian psychology teaches that the psyche achieves wholeness not by eliminating contradictions, but by harmonizing them. Each archetype, each shadow impulse has its role. Each projection is a message waiting to be understood. I guide him through a visualization, meeting his inner child, acknowledging fears without judgment, and allowing the conscious self to converse with the hidden parts of his mind. In this exercise, the patterns that once drove impulsive reactions and defensiveness begin to reveal their origins. Awareness itself is transformative. The journey of the mind, I continue, is not about erasing flaws or masking vulnerabilities. It is about recognition, acceptance, and conscious choice. When you understand the forces within, you gain freedom to act rather than react. As he listens, I see subtle changes in posture, and expression. The rigid persona softens, if only slightly. There is a willingness to consider that strength is not the absence of fear, but the conscious management of it. That influence is not only in commanding attention, but in understanding oneself. That leadership begins within, in dialogue with the psyche, not merely in transactions with the world. We conclude by reflecting on individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. For a man of such public visibility, the stakes are high, yet the principle is universal. Every human mind contains contradictions, fears, and potentials. Awareness and integration turn these elements from obstacles into allies. Finally, I leave him with this thought. Power, recognition, and authority are fleeting, but the mind's depth is eternal. Engage with it, understand it, and you will find a freedom no external success can provide.